After 10 years abroad, I finally sat on a plane headed home. I stared out the window and smiled. 10 years, I whispered to myself. 10 years of overtime. 10 years of missed birthdays. 10 years of loneliness. But it was over. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last photo Emily had sent me. Ethan stood beside her, already taller than I remembered. Sophie smiled while holding a school trophy. "I'll make it up to all of you," I said quietly. The moment the plane landed, my heart raced. I couldn't stop imagining their faces. Emily running into my arms. The kids shouting, "Dad!" Family dinners. Movie nights. A normal life. The life I'd spent 10 years building. When the taxi finally stopped outside my house, I almost laughed from excitement. "This is it," I told the driver. I grabbed my bags and walked to the front door. My hand shook as I knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Emily stood there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "Emily." "Jack." I smiled and opened my arms. She hugged me, but something felt wrong. Her embrace was brief, uncomfortable, almost forced. "I missed you so much," I said. "Yeah, we missed you too." I pulled back and looked at her. "You okay?" "Of course." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. I stepped inside. The house looked different. Not completely different. Just enough to make me feel like a visitor. "Where are the kids?" "They're upstairs." Before I could answer, footsteps came from the hallway. A teenage boy appeared. I froze. "Ethan?" He stared at me. "Hi." I laughed awkwardly. "Hi? That's all I get?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry. It's just weird." "Weird? I haven't seen you in years." The words hit harder than I expected. Before I could respond, Sophie entered the room. She looked older, too. Much older. "Hey, Dad." I smiled. "Come here." She hugged me politely. Politely. Not the way a daughter hugs a father she hasn't seen in 10 years. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Look at you two." Neither of them said much. The silence felt heavy. Emily cleared her throat. "You must be tired." "A little." I set my bags down and looked around. That's when I noticed the first photo. It sat on a shelf near the television. At first, I thought nothing of it. Then I looked closer. There was Emily. There were Ethan and Sophie. And standing beside them was a man I had never seen before. I frowned. "Who's this?" Emily immediately looked away. "Oh, that's..." She didn't finish. I walked closer. There were more photos. On the wall. On the bookshelf. On the mantel. The same man appeared again and again. Birthday parties. School events. Family vacations. Family vacations. My stomach dropped. "Emily." She stayed silent. "Who is he?" Before she could answer, I heard a key turning in the front door. Everyone suddenly became tense. Why does he have keys to my house? The question hung in the air. Emily folded her arms. "Because he helps around here." "He helps around here?" Daniel looked uncomfortable. "It's not what you're thinking." "Then explain it." Nobody spoke. Finally, Emily sighed. "After you left, things got hard. I was sending money every month." "I know." "Then what was hard?" "Life, Jack." The answer hit me harder than I expected. Daniel picked up the grocery bags. I'll put these away. No, I said. Stay. He froze. If we're having this conversation, we're having it together. Emily rubbed her forehead. Daniel helped when the roof leaked. I laughed bitterly. So he became family because he hired a contractor. That's not fair. What else did he do? Emily looked at the floor. A lot. The words stung. Ethan finally spoke. He came when my car broke down. I turned toward him. You have a car? Yeah. I blinked. I hadn't even known. He taught me how to drive. The room went silent. I forced a smile. That's great. But inside, I felt something breaking. Sophie looked uncomfortable. He helped me too. How? When I got bullied at school. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you call me? She looked away. You were always working. The answer hurt because it was true. I sat down heavily. For years, I'd convinced myself I was sacrificing everything for them. Now I wasn't sure they saw it that way. A knock sounded at the door. Emily opened it. My parents walked inside. Dad, my mother said. I stood quickly. Mom. She hugged me. My father shook my hand. It's good to have you back, son. For a moment, I felt relief. Then my father noticed Daniel. Evening, Daniel. Good evening, Robert. They smiled at each other naturally, like old friends. My stomach tightened. My mother walked over and touched Daniel's shoulder. Thanks again for helping with those repairs. No problem. I stared at them. You're close too? My father frowned. What kind of question is that? A simple one. Dad sighed. Daniel has been there for this family. So have I. His expression softened. Not physically. The words landed like a punch. Dinner that evening felt like torture. Everyone sat around the table. Everyone except me seemed comfortable. Daniel passed Sophie a bowl. Here you go. Thanks. Ethan looked toward him. Can you help me with the college applications tomorrow? Of course. I nearly dropped my fork. College applications? Ethan looked surprised. You didn't know? No. Nobody said anything. The silence answered everything. I wasn't part of their daily lives anymore. I was a visitor. A stranger sitting at his own table. I pushed my plate away. Emily noticed. You barely ate. I'm not hungry. Dad leaned back. Jack, nobody is trying to hurt you. Really? No. Then why does it feel like I'm attending someone else's family dinner? Nobody had an answer. I looked at Ethan. When was the last time we talked? He hesitated. I don't know. I looked at Sophie. I barely slept that night. The guest room felt cold and unfamiliar. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's clothes hanging in the closet that had once held mine. The next morning, I walked downstairs hoping things would somehow feel normal. Instead, they felt worse. Ethan sat at the kitchen table eating breakfast. Morning, I said. Morning. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. So, how's school going? Good. The conversation died immediately. I tried again. What subjects do you like? He shrugged. Engineering, mostly. Really? Yeah. I smiled. That's great. He nodded politely. Then Daniel walked into the room. Ready for your driving test practice later? Definitely, Ethan said. His face lit up instantly. I looked away. Daniel noticed my expression. I'm just helping. I can see that. An awkward silence followed. A few hours later, I found Sophie in the living room. She was working on something for school. He sat beside her. Can I help? She smiled politely. I already finished most of it. That's good. I pointed at a photo on the table. You won an award? Last year. Why didn't you tell me? She hesitated. I sent pictures. Pictures. Not conversations. Not memories. Just pictures. I forced a smile. What was the event like? It was fun. She paused. Daniel came. The smile disappeared from my face. Oh. He recorded my speech. That's nice. He never missed any school events. The words weren't meant to hurt me. That made them hurt even more. For the next few days, I kept hearing similar stories. Story after story. Memory after memory. None of them included me. One afternoon, Ethan showed me an old video. Watch this. On the screen, he was learning to drive. I listened as he laughed. Easy on the brakes, Daniel's voice said. Teenage Ethan grinned at the camera. I got it. I handed the phone back. When was that? 3 years ago. 3 years. 3 years of moments I could never get back. That evening, I sat alone on the back porch. For years, I had told myself I was doing the right thing. Every overtime shift, every missed holiday, every lonely apartment overseas. I believed the sacrifices would be worth it. Now I wasn't so sure. Emily stepped outside and sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. Did I ruin everything? She looked surprised. What? I worked non-stop. I know. I sent money. I know. Then why does it feel like I lost my family anyway? Emily looked down. Because families need more than money. The answer stung. I did it for you. I know you did. Then why does everyone act like I'm a stranger? Her eyes filled with tears. Because you became one. I stood up. That's not fair. It isn't? No. You missed birthdays. I was working. You missed graduations. I was providing. You missed holidays. What choice did I have? Emily suddenly stood too. You could have come home more often. I was trying to secure our future. Her voice cracked. And while you were securing our future, our present disappeared. I froze. Tears rolled down her cheeks. You don't understand how hard it was. Then I barely slept after overhearing Daniel's phone call. The words kept repeating in my head. They still don't know anything. What didn't we know? The next morning, I decided I needed answers. Real answers. Not assumptions. Not jealousy. Facts. I called my younger sister Grace. She answered immediately. Jack? Hey. You sound terrible. I feel terrible. What happened? I took a deep breath. Do you remember Daniel? The guy everyone's always talking about? Yeah. What about him? I think he's hiding something. There was a brief pause. Then Grace spoke carefully. Do you have proof? No. Then let's find some. For the first time in days, I felt hopeful. Can you help me? Of course. 2 days later, Grace drove to the house. We met at a small cafe across town. The moment she sat down, she opened a notebook. I called someone. Who? My friend, Olivia. The journalist? Grace nodded. She knows how to find information. I leaned forward. Did she find anything? A little. What kind of little? Grace slid several printed pages across the table. I looked down. Business records. Court filings. Bankruptcy notices. My eyebrows rose. These are Daniel's? Yes. I scanned the documents. 3 businesses. All failed. Large debts. Multiple lawsuits. Nothing criminal. But nothing reassuring either. This doesn't prove anything. I know. Grace took a sip of coffee. But Olivia kept digging. Later that afternoon, the 3 of us met in Olivia's office. Olivia shook my hand. Nice to meet you. Thank you for helping. No problem. She opened a file folder. Daniel is difficult to track. What do you mean? He moves frequently. How frequently? Every few years. That immediately caught my attention. Why? Olivia shrugged. I don't know. She handed me several pages. I studied them carefully. Different cities, different jobs, different business ventures, different groups of friends. Yet one pattern appeared repeatedly. Daniel would become extremely involved in people's lives, then eventually move on. That's strange. Olivia nodded. Very. Grace leaned forward. What else did you find? Olivia hesitated. I'm not sure how significant this is. Tell us. In several places, people describe Daniel the same way. How? She glanced at her notes. They said he always made himself indispensable. I looked up. Indispensable? He fixed problems. She flipped through papers. He helped financially. Another page. He became emotionally important. Another page. He was always available. I felt a chill run through me, because that description perfectly matched what had happened with my family. A few hours later, Michael's words stayed with me for days. Daniel wasn't simply stealing lives. He was attaching himself to them. The difference mattered, but it didn't make the situation any less painful. A few days later, Grace called me. I found something else. I immediately sat up. What is it? More people. What people? Families Daniel became involved with. My stomach tightened. What did they say? Most of them liked him. That wasn't the answer I expected. Liked him? Yes. Grace sounded frustrated. But the stories are strange. How? He always appeared when people were struggling. I remained silent. Grace continued. A broken marriage. Another pause. A sick parent. Another. Financial problems. I knew where this was going. And then? He became the person everyone depended on. That evening, Olivia joined us again. She spread several files across the table. I think I found the pattern. I leaned forward. Tell me. He didn't create every problem. What does that mean? Olivia pointed to several notes. Most problems already existed. Okay. But he often made them seem worse. I frowned. How? She opened one file. In one case, he convinced a family their financial situation was critical. Was it? Not really. She opened another. He exaggerated repair issues. Another file. He pushed people to believe they needed help immediately. I stared at the papers. So, he became the hero. Olivia nodded. Exactly. The realization disturbed me. Daniel hadn't forced anyone. He hadn't threatened anyone. He hadn't committed obvious crimes. Instead, he carefully positioned himself as the solution. The dependable friend. The trusted advisor. The person nobody wanted to lose. When I returned home, Emily was sitting alone in the living room. She looked exhausted. We need to talk. She nodded weakly. I handed her the files. She spent nearly an hour reading them. The longer she read, the paler she became. Finally, she looked up. No. I sat across from her. Emily? No. Tears filled her eyes. He wouldn't do that. The evidence says otherwise. She shook her head repeatedly. This can't be real. I wish it wasn't. For several minutes, she stared silently at the papers. Then she whispered something that broke my heart. I trusted him. I didn't know what to say. Because so had everyone else. The following evening, the entire family gathered in the dining room. Nobody wanted to be there. But nobody wanted to avoid the truth anymore either. Daniel sat quietly at one end of the table. The files rested in front of him. Emily spoke first. Is it true? Daniel looked at the documents. Then, at all of us. What part? The manipulation. Silence filled the room. Finally, Daniel sighed. I never wanted to hurt anyone. That's not an answer, I said. My father leaned forward. Did you intentionally make people depend on you? Daniel rubbed his face. For the first time since I had met him, he looked defeated. I don't know. What does that mean? Ethan asked. It means things got complicated. Sophie stared at him. Then explain. Daniel's eyes became glassy. I didn't plan any of this. Nobody spoke. His voice trembled. But I loved them. The room froze. He looked toward Ethan. I loved helping you. Then Sophie. I was proud of you. Then Emily. You were my friend. Finally, he looked at me. I never expected things to go this far. After Daniel admitted he had nowhere else to go, I expected another battle. Instead, I made a different choice. I stopped focusing on him. For too long, Daniel had occupied every thought in my head. Every conversation. Every argument. Every frustration. The more I thought about it, the clearer something became. Daniel wasn't the only reason I had lost my family. My absence had played a role too. If I wanted my life back, I needed to stop fighting for a position and start earning it. The next morning, I knocked on Ethan's bedroom door. Come in. I stepped inside. He looked surprised. Everything okay? I wanted to ask you something. What? I took a breath. Would you like to have lunch together? He blinked. Just us? Yeah. For a moment, he seemed unsure. Then he smiled slightly. Okay. That small smile felt like a victory. Later that day, we sat at a local restaurant. The conversation started awkwardly, then gradually became easier. You nervous about college? I asked. A little. That's normal. You were? When I was your age? Absolutely. He laughed. Really? I was terrified. The tension between us eased. For the first time since coming home, I wasn't trying to compete with Daniel. I was simply trying to know my son. Over the following weeks, we spent more time together. College applications, sports events, long drives. One evening, he surprised me. Dad? Yeah? Thanks for showing up. The words nearly broke me. I smiled. You're welcome. A few days later, Sophie knocked on my guest room door. Can we talk? Of course. She sat on the edge of the bed. Immediately, I noticed something was wrong. What happened? She looked down. I'm having trouble with a friend. I waited. For several minutes, she explained everything. Normally, I would have offered solutions immediately. Instead, I listened. When she finally finished, she looked exhausted. What should I do? I smiled gently. What do you think you should do? She thought about it, then slowly answered her own question. By the end of the conversation, she hugged me. Not politely, not awkwardly. A real hug. I miss this, she whispered. So did I. Something inside me healed that day. I also began spending more time with my parents. One afternoon, I visited them alone. My father poured coffee. We've missed having you around. I know. He studied me carefully. You're different. Different how? You listen more. I laughed softly. Maybe I finally learned something. My mother smiled. It's nice seeing you here again. For the first time in years, I wasn't acting like a provider. I wasn't measuring my value through paychecks. I wasn't calculating sacrifices. I was simply being present. A father. A son. A husband. Meanwhile, Daniel's situation continued getting worse. The first sign came through a phone call. I was in the kitchen when his phone rang. The conversation became heated almost immediately. No, I don't have the money. Silence. I said I need more time. Another pause. His face turned pale. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. A few days later, another call arrived. Then another. Then another. Debt collectors. Lawyers. Financial advisors. The pressure never seemed to stop. One evening, Emily sat beside me on the porch. We watched the sunset quietly. Finally, she spoke. I've been thinking, after Daniel's company collapsed, everything happened quickly. Too quickly. Within days, more calls started coming. Lawyers. Creditors. Former business associates. The phone seemed to ring constantly. Every conversation ended the same way. With disappointment. Or demands. Or threats. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Daniel staring at a stack of unopened envelopes. They keep coming, he muttered. I looked at the letters. Bad news? He laughed bitterly. At this point, I don't think any other kind exists. For the first time since meeting him, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not manipulation. Not confidence. Fear. Over the next few weeks, his situation worsened. His savings disappeared. His accounts were frozen. Several people who once called him daily suddenly stopped answering his calls. The irony wasn't lost on me. One evening, I overheard him leaving a voicemail. Please call me back. Silence. I just need a few minutes. More silence. Please. He lowered the phone. Nobody called back. I knew exactly how that felt. Years earlier, I had spent birthdays alone in tiny apartments overseas. I had watched my family celebrate through photographs. I understood what it meant to feel abandoned. That realization disturbed me, because despite everything, I couldn't enjoy watching him suffer. A few days later, Emily asked if we could talk. We sat together in the backyard. For several minutes, she stared at the ground. Then she spoke. "I'm sorry." I looked at her. "For what?" "For everything." The words came quietly. "I should have set boundaries." I remained silent. She continued. "I let things become complicated." Her eyes filled with tears. "I was lonely." "I know. That's not an excuse." "No." She nodded. "I know." For the first time, there was no defensiveness in her voice, only regret. She reached for my hand. "I hurt you." I squeezed her fingers gently. "We both made mistakes." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you for giving us another chance." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I simply sat beside her. Sometimes silence says enough. Later that week, Ethan knocked on my bedroom door. "Got a minute?" "Always." He sat down. "I owe you an apology." I blinked. "For what?" "I pushed you away." I smiled sadly. "You had reasons." "Maybe." He looked down. "But I should have tried harder." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're trying now." He nodded. "Yeah." The next day, Sophie joined me while I was working in the garage. "Dad?" "What's up?" She hesitated. "I'm glad you're here." Those 4 words meant more than she realized. For years, I had wanted nothing more than to hear them. The walls between us were finally beginning to disappear. Meanwhile, Daniel seemed to shrink a little more each day. The house no longer revolved around him. Nobody asked for his advice constantly. Nobody depended on him the way they once had. One evening, I found him sitting alone on the porch. The sun was setting. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he broke the silence. "Do you know what the worst part is?" "What?" He stared into the distance. "I always thought if people needed me, they'd stay." I listened quietly. My whole life was built around that idea. Something in his voice felt different. Raw. Honest. I sat down beside him. For the first time, I wanted answers instead of arguments. "What happened to you?" He laughed softly. "Where do I start?" "At the beginning." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then the words began pouring out. "My mother left when I was 6. I stayed silent. My father drank constantly." Another pause. "Different houses." Another. "Different relatives. Can you forgive me?" Daniel's question stayed with me long after our conversation ended. For several days, I didn't answer. I wasn't sure I could. Part of me still remembered the anger, the resentment, the years of pain. But another part of me remembered something else. The loneliness in his voice, the regret in his eyes. The truth was complicated. Daniel had hurt my family, but he had also helped them. Both things were true. A week later, Daniel asked everyone to gather in the living room. The atmosphere felt heavy. Nobody knew what he planned to say. Daniel stood quietly in front of us. Then he took a deep breath. "I'm leaving." The room became silent. Emily blinked. "What?" Daniel nodded. "It's time." Nobody spoke. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone who had finally stopped running. Daniel turned toward my parents first. Robert. My father looked up. I'm sorry. Dad remained silent. Daniel swallowed. You welcomed me into your lives, and I crossed lines I never should have crossed. My father nodded slowly. Thank you for admitting it. Then Daniel faced my mother. Helen, I'm sorry. Tears filled her eyes. I know. His gaze shifted to Ethan. My son looked uncomfortable. Daniel forced a weak smile. You deserved honesty. Ethan lowered his head. Yeah. I should have respected your family. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan nodded. I hope things get better for you. Daniel's eyes became glassy. Thank you. Then he looked at Sophie. She was already crying. I'm sorry. Sophie wiped her eyes. I know you cared about us. I did. His voice cracked. Very much. She nodded sadly. But things got complicated. Daniel laughed bitterly. That's one way to describe it. Finally, he turned toward Emily. The room felt completely still. Emily stood slowly. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Then Daniel broke the silence. You were a good friend. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I should have stopped this sooner. Maybe. Daniel shook his head. But I made my own choices. Emily nodded. So did I. Then Daniel looked at me. For a moment, neither of us moved. I don't expect anything from you. I studied him carefully. I know. He took a deep breath. But I'm sorry. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to ignore. I believe you. His eyes widened slightly. Thank you. That afternoon, he packed his belongings. The process felt strangely quiet. No arguments. No accusations. No dramatic confrontations. Just acceptance. As he carried his final bag to the front door, he paused.